Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to episode 2 of Knives 101, and today I want to talk about blade grinds. Not blade styles, but blade grinds. How is the blade ground? That's something that you're going to be probably wondering, what all that is, what all that means when you're first starting out, because how the blade is ground has more effect on the knife than just the design. Alright, so I just want to talk about that with you guys while the idea is still kind of fresh on my mind. I guess we'll just start out first by talking about one particular kind of grind at a time. And one of the most common that you're going to come across is the full flat grind. Or also, it's kind of commonly abbreviated as just FFG. You'll hear people talk about FFG. But that's full flat grind. Alright, here again, what does that mean? Well, a full flat ground knife is when you have the stock of steel. Alright, so think of that thickness. Just imagine that thickness all the way down. This is a solid stock of steel. And they just put it on the grinder on each side. That's it. So they take a stock of steel, like I said, just like this, and they grind it on each side until it gets to that shape. Alright. Here again, it might not be the best example. Here is an example of a saber ground knife, where you have the stock of steel right here. It's the same thickness as right there, So that part right there, you see the ZT logo, that's known as the flat. That's just a normal stock of steel, and then they started to grind it. Alright. Compare that to this. See the difference? You don't have a flat. It is just ground from the single piece of stock, and they just grind it down. Now, full flat grind is what you hear a lot of people talk about. That's a lot of people's preference, and it is a good blade grind for a multitude of different tasks. Mainly, it's best in bushcraft and food prep. Also, a knife if you have this exact same knife, but this exact same knife, same handle and everything, same size, and you were to put a saber ground like I just showed you blade on it, it's going to be a little bit heavier. So full flat ground blades are going to be a little bit lighter because there's not as much material on them. And obviously for bushcraft, if you're going to be batoning through wood, this blade shape acts as a wedge because there is no resistance. It's just from the edge bevel all the way up to the spine, there's no resistance. It's a solid, straight angle, like a wedge. It's exactly how it is. It acts as a wedge. So it's it's arguably the best blade design for bushcraft. I'm not going to say it's the best because everybody has their different preferences, but I found it to work much better in bushcraft than in other blade designs. Food prep works the same way. That's why you always see kitchen knives. The chef's knives, they're always full flat ground because it's just the least amount of resistance through the material as possible. Here's another example of it with the Essie Azula. I just like showing this knife off. It's beautiful. But anyway, classic example of the full flat grind. Just solid all the way down. Now, if you have a big knife and it's full flat ground, that's good. But here again, you're going to lose some weight. So if you want a good chopping knife, I know people are going to come and say, well, machetes are usually full flat ground. Well, that's different. That's more of a hacking knife. That's not something you're going to chop a tree down with necessarily. I'm sure you could. That's not what I would want anyway. So, you have a big knife you want to do some chopping with. That saber grind is preferred because you're adding extra weight. So it just depends on what you need. But for bushcraft and for food prep and stuff like that, a full flat ground design is preferred among most people. So that's what that is. Not one of these designs, one of these grinds is necessarily the best. Like I was talking about blade steel. Not one is really better than another. It just depends on what you're using it for. So for bushcraft, food prep, things like that, I recommend a full flat ground knife. A lot of people like them just because of the way they look. That's fine, I personally love the way a full flat ground knife looks myself. Alright, now you're going to have saber ground knives, which is like I just showed you with my ZT. Saber grind works like, pretty much like the full flat grind starts, except you're going to have this flat area. Some knives, are flat farther down. Here you go. Here's the Ep2. Here's probably a better example. Alright, see this flat area where you see the Spidey logo? That is the original stock of steel. And then they just ground it down pretty much halfway between the tip and the spine. Or halfway between the belly and the spine is when they started that grind downward. So that's a classic example of a saber grind. Also, I forgot to grab it, but the Spyderco Enduras and Delicas, they're saber ground. The older style, anyway. It's kind of a good example of a saber. It's a different grind altogether. This is actually a different grind, but that's just kind of what is easier to represent for a saber grind. Yeah, some people prefer saber ground knives for day-to-day tasks. It's just, it really doesn't make that big of a difference between saber grind and full flat grind. There really isn't that big of a difference. But that is pretty much what a saber grind is going to look like. It's just where you have the flat of the steel, and then they start the grind down towards the cutting bevel, generally halfway between the edge and the spine. But like I said, there are exceptions here again. With the ZT, it's much higher, and generally, this is not always the case. Generally, it's better. A lot of people prefer the full flat grind because you have a much more gradual angle before you get to the cutting bevel. Some people say it's going to make your knife sharper. It all depends on how the edge is ground, guys. Every company is going to grind their edge slightly differently. It's a pretty high saber grind, meaning there's a lot of area to grind down, much more gradual approach to the cutting bevel. But if the cutting bevel, that's a completely separate video. I'm not even going to really discuss it that much in this video. But I'm just saying a lot of people prefer that because it's a much more gradual approach. But it doesn't really matter. Like I said, if the edge is ground well, it's not going to make a huge difference at all. To some people can tell the difference, but to a general user, it's not going to make any difference in the world, really. Like I said, edge geometry and all that stuff, completely separate video. That's a good example of a saber grind. Then you get into some of the exotic grinds, like this one, the Frost Mora, the Mora Clipper. You guys you're probably very familiar with these knives. This is known as a Scandi grind or a Scandinavian grind. Like you can see, it is a saber grind, but the edge, the secondary part right here, where they ground down to get to the cutting bevel. Scandinavian ground knives do not have a cutting bevel. So in here, Scandi grind or Scandinavian grind, that's what it is. This just happens to be a saber Scandi grind. See the more polished edge the more polished portion right there? It's where they have the flattest steel, they go down to approach the cutting bevel, and it's just one solid angle towards the cutting bevel. So really, all of this is the cutting bevel. Then you have convex grinds. Here again, this kind of falls into the edge category, but I kind of feel like talking about it a little bit. And a convex grind is where the cutting bevel is, instead of being like this, like you see on there, instead of being just like a flat angles, it's slightly curved like this. It's kind of rounded. It's convexed. And the reason I brought that up is because some knives, the entire stock of steel is like that. Like instead of this being full flat, you can have a full high convexed grind, where this whole area right here looks kind of like that. It's kind of bowed out. It has its own advantages and disadvantages. I have not owned a knife like that. You really don't see those unless it's a custom knife. I've never compared side by side, so I don't really know how they perform. But that's just something that I wanted to bring up because it is a type of grind. Alright, now you get into the kind of, not really complex, but less noticeable. That is a hollow grind. And the Ep2 is a hollow ground knife. Alright, so this area right here where they ground down, if you can see the light kind of glistening off of it, you can see it's kind of scooped out looking. Maybe hard to tell. You can really feel it though. I see the light. You can tell it's kind of scooped out, and that is a hollow grind. But what you get with a hollow grind knife is you have a very, very, very thin edge behind the cutting edge. You have a very, very thin angle. So like I said, instead of this angle, you're going to get that. So you go from this to that. It's not that huge of a difference, but it's just enough of a difference to notice when you're slicing. So if you're cutting through a material, you're going to notice a slight difference. Hollow grind knives are just usually really great for slicing because, like I said, they're really thin behind the edge. And that's not great for utility, to be honest with you guys. Here again, there's not a huge difference, but it's not going to be that great for utility because, like I said, you are getting a thinner edge. So when you have a thinner edge, it's going to be a little bit more brittle, I guess you can say. It's not going to be as durable. So that's really great for food preparation. Kind of like when I was talking about full flat grind knife. This is probably better for food preparation and for smaller EDC cutting tasks. Full flat grind knives are generally for your stronger, this is a saber ground knife, but it's flat ground. It's a flat saber grind. Let's see if I can get a comparison there. Alright. Like I said, generally a hollow ground knife isn't going to be quite as strong as, say, like that. But, that's partially my opinion. That's just also from my experience that they're not going to be as durable behind the edge. Alright? Not here again, not that huge of a difference, but I just wanted to bring that up because we are talking about grinds. Alright, next we'll talk about the swedge. I know you guys hear that term a lot. If you don't know what that is, that's a swedge. This portion right here. It looks just like the grind going down towards the cutting edge, except it's up top. Yeah, it's just where they grind down the steel at the spine of the knife. You can see there, and here again, bring in the ZT. It's a partial swedge because it doesn't go all the way to the tip. Now, a lot of people, and I've always heard this, and I've even said it, but I have no way of saying for sure if it's true or not. I've always heard that the swedge is going to reinforce the tip and make it stronger. Here again, I cannot say that for sure because I've never tested a knife side by side before, one with a swedge, one without, to see how the tip holds up. So I can't say for sure if that's really true or not, but that's just what I've always been told. It is going to make the blade thinner behind the tip, which, if you're looking into a tactical knife, a lot of people prefer that because it's better at piercing material, and because like I said, it's not so thick behind that tip. But here again, it depends slightly. This ZT has a wicked tip, and look how thick it is behind the tip. Alright guys, real quick, I want to give you kind of a better visual representation of some of the different grinds I was talking about. From the perspective of, looking at the blade head on with the tip facing you. So yeah, flat grind, hollow, and then saber. It just kind of gives you a better idea of what I was talking about. Like I said, a better visual representation of it. Real quick. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, of course, leave them down in the comments box for me, guys. Alright, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay sharp, and God bless. Sherman 614. Peace.